So by now you've heard about the iPhone 15 and you've probably seen a lot of content around them. We've been testing the phone for a couple of days, and instead of doing a typical unboxing video which we made and cancelled, I wanted to talk a little bit about the experience of the phones and whether you're in the camp of already decided to buy the new iPhone, which is out today by the way, or whether you're considering buying the phone. I want to talk about what feels to have changed, what seems to have changed in the new phones, and whether or not they're going to be worthy of an upgrade, especially if you're coming from a previous generation or many generations back iPhone. So let's quickly get started with this video. At the outset, when you open the phones for the first time, the first thing you'll notice is the softer nature of the design of the phone. While the design seems familiar on all of these phones, there are subtle changes that make the phone different enough to worthy an upgrade if you're going for an upgrade in terms of looks. The phones are rounded off and feel a lot more comfortable in the hand. If you're in the camp where you don't want a cover on your phone, the phones are a lot more comfortable to hold for extended periods of time because of the softer edges and the rounded nature of the back. The back panel on the non-Pro models is also now etched. The glass is matted out, and because of this effect, it feels a lot softer in the hand. Again, different from what we had in the 13 or the 14 series. What's also different this time around is USB-C. And it is a lot more useful on the Pro models, but USB-C in general was warranted and also legally required. So I think Apple has made the switch, and now the entire Apple lineup is USB-C, including the new AirPods Pro that they've launched. And if you want us to do a video on those, let us know in the comment section below. On the non-Pro models, the 15 and 15 Plus, the prices are the same for India. And in fact, if you get some of the bank offers and take GST input, if you do have a business, then they turn out to be cheaper than what they're sold for in the US, which is fantastic. The new phones are also assembled in India for the 15 and the 15 Plus from the get-go. Usually initial lots were imported and then eventually manufacturing in India would happen, or actually assembly in India would happen. But now these phones are assembled in India from the get-go, which is great. The Pro models, on the other hand, have gotten really expensive. The 15 Pro starts at 1,35,000 approximately, and the Pro Max starts at 1,60,000 approximately. But there is a lot more in the Pro models this time around, where I think that they're actually offering a lot more Pro features than the previous models. And if you're a Pro videographer or a Pro creator, then this time around the new models are actually worth the money, or they might end up being worth the money if you're investing in that. The displays are also different on all the models this time around. So on the non-Pro models, the 15 and 15 Plus, you now have OLED displays, and you also get the dynamic island. It was a big feature for the 14 Pro and 14 Pro Max last year, and it's now available. I think that they've managed to execute this really well. A dead area on a phone has become alive, and they basically use the wasted space in giving you animations, notifications, and allowing you to utilize that space a lot better. And I think Apple has executed it well, and which is why they brought it to the non-Pro models, and it just works really well. The displays are OLED, but they're not more than 60 Hz, so they remain at that. But if you've used a 120 Hz screen, you will find this to be an issue. Also, I feel it's 2023, and anything worth the amount of money that you're paying for the iPhones should have a faster refresh rate, 90 Hz if not 120 Hz. But 60 Hz seems like a little bit of an issue, but you guys decide and let me know in the comments below. The Pro models continue to get 120 Hz, which is called Pro Motion on their display. And now both, or actually all four of the models, have a peak brightness of 2000 nits in outdoors, which is excellent. Whereas previously on non-Pro models, you had 1000 nits of brightness. This time around, it's doubled to 2000 nits. The Pro models last year also had 2000 nits, so nothing's changed over there. On the Pro models, however, the display goes out a lot more to the edges, so you have a narrower bezel, making the phones look a lot more premium. The bezels are thinner. They're still symmetrical all around the phone, and the phone just looks better. And the overall size of the phone has been reduced because of this. So if you put a Pro 14 next to a Pro 15, you'll find that the size is ever so slightly smaller. What is also different between the last year Pro model and this year Pro model is the weight of the phones. They're approximately 20 grams lighter than the previous year's phones because of the titanium frame that they use on the new models. Not only does this look good, it is considerably lighter, and the first time I removed the phone from the box, I actually thought that the Pro Max was the Pro model, because of how much lighter it was, and I had to confirm twice to make sure that this was the Pro Max. With titanium come a lot of additional benefits. The frame is a little more rigid, and because of the new aluminum structure on the inside of the phones, it allows for better heat dissipation and allows for a lot more performance on the phones, which is essential because there's also a new chip in the Pro models, which is the A17 Pro, first 3 nanometer chip. And this chip has hardware enabled ray tracing, which allows for some really epic gaming capabilities. You'll be able to play console level games on the iPhone. The A17 Pro is also really impressive in terms of its performance. We ran some benchmarks and found that it is as good as the M1 chip, which is a desktop grade chip that Apple launched. And we have an M1 Mac Mini, and the benchmarks are quite interesting to look at. The A17 Pro is also used for new camera capabilities. So the Pro models now have 4K 60 in log on ProRes, and it can record directly to an external SSD thanks to the USB-C port that we mentioned earlier. On the Pro models, you get 10 gigabit data transfer speeds. The non-Pro models also get 480 megabits, but you don't have external video recording. But you don't need it because ProRes is only available on the Pro models still. This is something that we find really useful and plan to test out in depth. So stay tuned for some interesting content around the 4K 60 ProRes with the log recording. We've already tested it out on some drives that we have, and you don't really need a fast drive. Any external SSD more or less works with this. And it's a really good feature to have on an iPhone because even a lot of mainstream cameras are not offering this as of now. And I think that might change because of this feature on the iPhone. Let's talk about the cameras. The non-Pro phones get the 48 megapixel camera from the Pro phone last year, and also the same chip. So you get an A16 Bionic chip, which enables the 48 megapixel camera to work a little bit better on the non-Pro models. You also have faster UI and all of that. But the camera itself will now natively shoot 24 in the standard mode. So if you're just clicking a picture and saving it, it'll save it as a 24 megapixel shot. There's a lot of detail in this camera. We've used it over the past year, and this camera is great, but they've also added improvements to their photonic engine, which also now works better in low light. And this camera itself is pretty good for low light. So you get a lot better images on the main camera. Again, something that we want to test in depth, and we'll have some content around it. But I think the new cameras are a worthy enough upgrade for a lot of people apart from the other things. So if you're coming from a previous generation phone, the 48 megapixel camera is a drastic difference in terms of photography. So if you're creating content, and if you're somebody who's creating content for social media, or you're an amateur photographer, you can definitely pick up a new 15 without thinking about it twice if you use your phone for photography quite a lot. Another feature for the cameras that's been added across the lineup this time around is next generation portraits, they're calling it, which allows you to focus after the fact. So if you clicked a picture, you'll be able to go back into the image in the Photos app and change the focus. So if you want to focus in the foreground or background, you can adjust it as per your requirements. This is a really cool way to tweak your images and get some different results from it. If you move on to the Pro end, the Pro and the Pro Max now also have a new 48 megapixel camera, which has a larger pixel size. And at the outset, you don't really notice a lot of difference in the images. But if you go into low light or start shooting RAW, you definitely see the improvements in the new camera. The new camera also has an improved sensor shift image stabilization. The Pro Max also has a 5x optical zoom this time around with the tetra prism lens. This is really useful if you're into photography or videography. If you're planning on buying this phone to do a lot of video content, I would definitely recommend the Pro Max, which now basically costs as much as a DSLR camera. And the good thing is that you don't need to buy something with a lot of storage because you can now offload easily using the USB-C drive. So if you want to offload your images and video to an external drive, you can easily do that, and then you don't need to have a large capacity iPhone. So the 1,60,000 price is where you're at if you're getting the Pro Max. Another thing that's different in the Pro model is the action button. It functions as the mute switch still, so if you long press on it, it'll put your phone to silent. But then you can customize it between a few options that Apple provides, and you can quickly use it to launch the camera. And if you're somebody who's into photography or videography, this will be a really useful feature. If you do that, then you can put the mute switch in the control center. Another thing that was changed this time around was the new cases, and I was excited to look at the new fine woven cases. While they are a good replacement for leather, and I'm glad that Apple has removed leather, but I'm not really a fan of the cases. I don't like the way they feel in the hand, and while they look good and the colors are nice, I personally prefer the new silicone cases, or actually their old silicone cases. I personally prefer the silicone cases versus the new fine woven cases. Overall, the new lineup is a lot more different, and while it appears to be the same from the get-go, there are a lot interesting features added. The A16 Bionic, the dynamic island, and the new camera in the non-Pro models is definitely something that is worth an upgrade and will warrant an upgrade even from the 14 if you're coming from that. And the rounded edges and the overall soft feel of the phone makes them nice. Also, the colors on the back are now a little more softer versus if you had the previous generation model, you'll see that the colors are a lot brighter and vivid. This time around, the colors are also a lot softer. On the Pro models, you get a really high performance chip this time around, and you get improvements on the camera side, but you also get internal improvements which allow for offloading onto external drives. And if you're doing ProRes video, that is something that will be really useful with the 4K 60. Another thing that's obviously interesting is the USB-C port and a lot of functionality that will now enable on iPhones, which was previously locked behind dongles and lightning connectors, which if you did buy a lot of those, then there is an adapter available on the Apple Store, which will allow you to convert your lightning accessories to a USB-C port and allow you to use that. Well, that's our first impressions of the new iPhones. We'll be doing a lot of content around it, including some interesting camera tests. Stay tuned for those. If you have any questions or queries, drop them in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in the next one.